Number one, get to know your customer's network. So Mark, I'm going to start with you, and just real simply, what do we mean by that, get to know your customer's network?
Well, first let me set up a couple things, because before I became a consultant at Chen Molson Wilkie, I've got over 10 years inside a large organization. So that 18% on your last graphic, green, is I can talk a little bit about that and the need to work alongside both your internal local area network and wide area network engineers, as well as with engaging consultants and AV integrators. And also, tip number 17 is going to be just as important as tip number 1. So I think the key here with the tip 1 is that it really sets us up for all of them. And I think we saw when this rapid change, right, from standalone systems to becoming completely dependent upon IP networking. So it's really a part of the entire structure. If the network is not set up properly and prepared for the AV integrator, they're not going to be able to get their installations done right. So the first thing we got to do is do our research. So before going into that meeting, that first time you're talking to that AV, the IT manager, there probably was a prior discussion. If there was, you need to find that background, because one way to win over an IT manager is not to make them repeat themselves over again. If they've already given a deep dive, find out who that was, and then come in with a list of questions. You want to be as efficient and productive in this session as possible. It's going to be appreciated. They want to know that you are ready to answer their questions. Your requirements, well, they'll want to have had those 6 months ago, and you just got on board, right? You're already behind the 8 ball, and it's no fault of your own. It's just that that's how fast these networks have to be set up in advance. So instead of getting frustrated, you need to be able to explain what you need, and you need to do it succinctly. And we're going to go more into that in detail as this gets unfolds here. But clear requirements, and in that first conversation, you need to look at the scope here. What is the IT scope? Is it a new project? Are you just inserting new AV services over existing? Because that completely changes the conversation starting point if they're engaging in a completely new switches and new architecture, or if you're just simply putting something on top. Are they using fiber? How much resiliency in place? These things sound like they're side conversations, but you're going to get stuck answering questions about security, about bandwidth, about remote access. So it's important you're prepared to respond to those questions. And when's the delivery schedule? When is that IDF closet going to be built? When will Wi-Fi be working? I mean, Wi-Fi was before not even a part of the conversation. And now it's absolutely critical that you're understanding what those expectations are from a senior person. And then there's really two conversations happening. One of them is with the overseer, the senior manager, working on these more large scope issues and questions. And then there's this direct relationship with the person overseeing the project. And that's the one you want to have both those conversations and be ready to engage on both sides.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mark. Now, Dan, we kind of state it in a very matter-of-fact way here on the slide where we say it starts with a conversation. And that's oversimplifying things. So I want you to kind of dig into a little bit more. Maybe you can add to what Mark said in terms of what are some things that, an integrator or consultant ought to try to get out of that conversation.
Well, I think the first conversation, we try and ascertain 3 different pieces of information, right? We want to know who we're talking to and who else needs to be involved. So are we talking to the AV team? Do we need to talk to the server team? Do we need to talk to the IT team? Do we need to talk to anybody in the management side of things who's going to be signing the checks on everything? So you need to know who you're talking to, and once you've figured that out, who else are the players that you need to bring into the meeting to get the full scope of the project? And this is not always the easiest conversation to have if you're working with a big Fortune 500 company or a government agency or someone that's maybe heavily segregated. One of the things that we also want to know is where. You want to actually, the physical geography of the customer's network can become important. Do they have a data center that's located off-site? Is the equipment that you're going to be installing going to be entirely on-premise, or is there going to be some cloud-based portion to things? Are you going to need to run through or interface with that data center? And then the last side of that kind of ties with the where is what Mark was talking about exactly, is what are you installing your system on? Are you installing it on a completely air-gapped network that's going to be just for AV, or are you going to be installing on an existing network where they will need to have access to it through all different portions and different locations across this Fortune 500 company? So those three basic questions are where we like to get things started when we're having our conversation with a customer.
Okay, and that's kind of from a manufacturer perspective, and then Joe, you can kind of speak from Yorktel, an integration firm's perspective. What are some things that you want or need to know about the customer's network at that early stage?
As much as we can, I mean, what the guys mentioned is absolute. Getting access to that high-level network architect and engineer at the customer is going to be critical. Obviously, having a clear understanding of the systems to be implemented. So from Yorktel's perspective, we're focused on AV and video. And if we're deploying a set number of video conference endpoints on the network, maybe putting an MCU and some other pieces of infrastructure on the network, we want to understand how that platform is going to traverse the network, right? It could be also desktop. I mean, everybody seems to be deploying desktop video of some form today, and that has massive implications to the network. Oftentimes, the folks running video don't understand the network themselves. I personally have come from a very large company, Merck & Company, 5 years ago. I was there 15 years, and running UC. So I understand the value of the role of the video team, the AV team being part of that network function. Even running webcasting, we couldn't make decisions on a unicast network without the attention and agreement from our network team. So what we'll do at Yorktel, if we have the luxury of this, and I call it a luxury, is try to do some sort of an assessment up front. We have had customers who we've brought onto our managed services platforms where their underlying network is fundamentally broken. And that just makes for an interesting managed services relationship as you're connected to that customer now for a couple of years and trying to make video work over that network. So whenever possible, we'll go in and do an initial assessment of their network. It may even include putting probes on site to really validate for them and for us the status and the success of their network.